This is what happens in our house every time we get fabric boxes out. The dog gets into it and takes off with pieces. So Axel was actually given his own piece of fabric, but he's still taking it out of my bucket and trying to chew on all of mine, even though that blue piece there is his. He's gotten into this one because we have picked up everything else, but he's a rat bag, I tell you. Alright, so we are going to give this bag a go. I've chosen a colourway of pinks and black and white, and then there's a little bit of yellow in amongst this fabric and this fabric. Basically what we're going to do is cut fabrics into strips, fold them and sew them up in a circle. And then my mum's going to give it a go in some purples and sort of see what the end result is of using more monochrome colours, or using a bit more of a mixture of patterns and colours. There are my fabric strips cut out. You need to have 18 strips, so I've done 3 of each colour, or the equivalent of. The soft pink on the very end is a bit skinnier, so I've done extra fabric of that. First part done. As it doesn't use a lot of each fabric, I can see why a lot of people use like the honey bun rolls or jelly rolls to do them. So I don't know if you can see this very well, but both my mat and my mum's mat has been through a lot of abuse. We're just discussing that it's probably about time for us to replace the mats and the rulers. Because even if you look over at the ruler, they have like scratch lines on it, but you also, some of the actual printed lines and numbers are starting to rub off. And there's a couple of chips on the side of the blade where we've accidentally been a little too forceful and taken a chunk of plastic out.
So what I'm doing with my ruler is I'm lining up the lines of the ruler with the lines of the mat so that I know I'm getting a true straight edge, and I've lined the fabric up with the line of the mat as well to make sure that I'm actually doing a square cut.
But here's Mum's fabrics so far, all pretty in a row. They're looking really nice together. So sewing up the fabrics to make one big strip, I am doing it on a 45-degree angle. Okay, so I have done my 2 strips. One will create the front of the bag, and one will create the back. To create this strip, we used 9 pieces of fabric, which were 1.5 inch wide and just over 1 meter each. So you can see there that I've got my join on a 45-degree angle. I've cut off the excess fabric and I have ironed it one way. So I'm guessing when it comes to folding this all up, by having it on the 45 means there's going to be less bulk at any one point. My next stage is then to cut just under 10 meters of this in half, because I need half of this to go inside there for when I fold it. Alright, so the packet says that this strip is 2 1/4 inches. So to cut it in half, obviously I'm going to do 1 1/8 inch. I'm going to use my ruler for this and just sort of wiggle it into place as close as we can. I think it's going to take me a little bit of time, but here we go. So there is my 2 bits of batting ready to go. I think I used about half of the ball. I think I used about half of the pre-cut. We're going to make the sashing. This is the little tool that they give you. This is the first time I've done this, so let's give it a go. This is the little HoneyBun sashing tool. I've never used a sashing tool before. So we're going to give this a go, see how it works. So you're laying the batting down inside the fabric, and then you're folding to the centre. I guess the idea is to get it as centre as possible, which is a wee challenge on its own. But I do imagine that's something you get better at. Oh, okay, just going to bring my iron around to the side. And just do the first 10 centimetres or so by hand with folding. Okay, I'm doing this a little cat-handed. Alright. And then the next part is to thread it on with your tool. It doesn't look like there's a right or a wrong way, so just through the top one and then down to the bottom one, and that's going to get you started. So the next part is to go to the sewing machine, and where we will fold this again and sew down the seam. And how the lady said to do it is basically to pull it down another so many inches and then sew the next part and then pull and sew. I still think it's going to be fiddly because as you pull this down, obviously you've got to line it up and everything like that. But I could see how it's easier than trying to iron the whole thing flat and then fold it. In theory, at least. Alright, so I'm going to see if I can show you this through the screen. It's going to be a bit of a challenge because, one, I've never done this before, and two, I honestly don't know how people film while they're sewing, because I just think my hands will be everywhere. Yeah, I just think I'll be everywhere in the scene, and I don't know if you'll be able to actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to move my needle over, start towards the edge, so as you can see we're folding it in half, and then we're just going to sew a little down. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just going to have to encourage it a little bit through the machine. So at this part of the setup we're just going to continue to fold these towards the centre, put a bit of pressure on that and slide it down and see how it just makes it all nice and even and tidy. And then again fold these over, fold that over and keep running that under the machine. So it's not as if this is a difficult process, just I think going to be time consuming as I've got 18 meters of fabric to do. Yeah, not sure if it's perfect, but I don't think it really needs to be, because by the time you've then curled it and put it in a bag, I don't think people are going to see, oh my goodness, it's not perfect. Again, so further down here you can see I'll just fold the fabrics to the center. You can see here that we're just doing our first join of the fabric. Because I did the join on the 45-degree angle, it means that when you slide this through, it's not going at any stage through a big bulk, it's just doing a little bit of the join at a time, and I think that's going to make life a little bit easier. Alright, so there we go. I have two long spaghetti chains. They took a bit longer to sew up than I thought they would. I think probably a good hour and a half each. But it looks like it's starting to come together. You know, now that it's like this, you can kind of see the colour combo and how it's going to look a little bit more. And this part wasn't really difficult. It was just, like I said, time consuming. You just had to concentrate on the folding and making sure it was all even as possible. I have started off with hand stitching the beginning of the circle. You need to stitch it quite tightly together when you first start. That's what I'm doing there, and I've just ironed it down to make it flat as well. Alright, so I'm here at my sewing machine. So I have my sewing machine set up on zigzag. I've got it at the slowest speed it will go, as this is definitely something you want to be doing slowly. And then you've got the width and the length of the stitches. Alright, so you can kind of see in the sewing machine there I have the fabric continuing around in a circle. Have noticed when you're starting it kind of curves upwards. Just keep trying to flatten it down. The more you ease in extra fabric, the flatter the disc becomes. I will iron it. It definitely needs a bit of an iron as well, but the more flatter you can make it at this stage, the better result you're going to have in the long run. Alright, so I have got the first colour. The idea is trying to keep it as flat as you can. Yeah, if you're finding it's really turning into a bowl, she told me that one of the ladies said unpick it and go back again and just sort of ease more of this fabric in. So this is how we're looking after the second colours on. We're still a little bit curved, still got a bit of a lift, but that will start flattening out as I get more fabric on. We have ran out of bobbin, so we're just winding one up. Alright, so I find that once I've got the first few colours on, sewing it up becomes a little bit easier. The fabric kind of just negotiates itself into the curve and it starts looking quite a bit flatter. So we're kind of at that stage now, and so the process should speed up a little bit as well. So I've almost done the circle. See, we've got the little tail there. Now that's just going to be folded over onto the wrong side and sewn down. Here you can see the end on the wrong side of the bag sewn down. And that's it from the right side, so it just gets tucked in behind. So as a whole, it's a little bit shapely, but no more sort of curvature to it than the first one that I did. So now I will just iron it out and it should be nice and flat like the other side.
after making the 2 round circles for the front and back, the next step is to choose the fabrics for the flap, the gusset and the handles. So I've cut them all to size, and here I am just piecing all of those bits together. Here I just tried to make a little time lapse of me creating the bag handle. As I didn't have another sashing tool, I did this just by hand with the iron, folding the edges of the fabrics to the centre, and be careful not to burn my fingers. And then I just had to top stitch the black fabric onto the pink to create the bag handle. The original pattern had you put the bag handle on the outside of the bag, then it used a circle to cover the raw edge of the bag handle. I decided I didn't really like this look, so I unpicked it and put the bag handle on the inside. And then the last step was to sew the gusset onto the front and the back of the bag. The biggest part of this was actually doing all the pinning. I think once all the pinning was in place, the actual sewing wasn't too difficult, but I did stab myself a lot. So I did make one more change. Putting the front and back of the bag on, I found the flap was too wide. So I had unpicked that and made it a bit more of an oval instead of a full circled. And lastly, here is my bag finished. A few times I was a bit concerned that it wasn't going to come out the way I thought it would, but it did, and it looks great. My mum also completed her bag today. She just had to put the domes on the inside, and that one will be done. So here are the 2 bags all finished and done. They are looking really cool. Thanks for joining me for this video. I know it was a bit longer than the other ones have been, but I really wanted to show you a large percentage of the process of making this bag.